I'm the Vice President of Rutgers Adjunct Faculty Union, and I'll be moderating today. This is a teaching on ICE and breaking the ties between ICE and Rutgers. It is being sponsored by the full-time unit, the AAUP-AFT, and the Adjunct Faculty Union. Our speaker today is going to be Eric Blanc. He's an author and he's an assistant professor at the Rutgers School of Management and Relations. And we're going to post in the chat, we're going to post some links to some of his work. So if you want to take a look at it, that'd be great. I'm going to start off with a basic question and we're going to jump in and going to take over. I want you to describe, as you see it, what the Trump administration is doing with ICE and CBP, and how you think it's affecting the local communities, including those in New Jersey. And I got to take wherever you want to go.
Yeah, thanks, Hank. Thanks, everybody. I think actually there might be other people on this call who can speak more broadly about just the general stance of the administration in relation to ICE. And so I'm hoping we can open a discussion. And I, in particular, can focus in on one of the pieces that I think is underestimated, and one of the ways that the administration is sort of very deeply complicit in a way that a lot of folks, maybe even on this call, aren't aware. And that's by propping up and giving money to these corporations that are central to ICE's functioning. And I was actually surprised, when we started this campaign, Schools Drop ICE, and I think after, in a few minutes, I'll give a little bit of overview of that. But we had a research team with some folks on this call, look to see which of the targets that we identified as these companies that are central to ICE were present on Rutgers. And it turns out Rutgers actually has 4 out of the 5 companies that we identified, which is much higher actually than most universities. And so just to flag, and then we can go into more detail, but I just want to let people know which companies there are. So we have enterprise rental cars. We have a deal with. And Enterprise, for people who don't know, is the rental agency that provides ICE with 99.9% of its vehicles. ICE doesn't have its own fleet. It depends on Enterprise. And so there's also Hilton, that various parts of Rutgers are steering procurement preferences to Hilton, which has been a major target of anti-ICE protests because Hiltons across the country are housing ICE agents. And so we have sort of institutional, maybe not on a Rutgers-wide level, but different parts of Rutgers have deals and are pushing people towards Hiltons. Not just that, the thing that I was sort of shocked by is our sports teams are using Global X airline charter. So Global X is one of the airline charter flight companies that is centrally used for ICE. So ICE agents, that's how they're getting around the country, and it's also how they're deporting people. And then finally, you have Target sells Rutgers licensed apparel and has also been at career fairs. And the Target has allowed ICE agents to kidnap its employees. It's based in Minnesota and refused to call for an end to the siege by ICE. And so again, we have 4 out of those 5. And in addition to that, we have Border Patrol is actively recruiting on campus. And there's 3 webinar sessions. There were 3 webinar sessions in February alone. So they're actively recruiting. And so this combination of Rutgers backing these central corporations to ICE is functioning. We can talk more about how central that is. And it allowing and sort of actively engaging with recruitment on campus shows the extent to which, despite many of the professed and sometimes real liberal values of our administration, there's a disconnect between the practice when it comes to putting a distance between our university and ICE.
This there's a history of this kind of activism targeting companies that are doing business in Rutgers. We saw this in sweatshop movement that occurred in the last 20 years. um, the Israel divestment movement set up South African apartheid. So can you talk a little bit to that about how effective those generally in the past?
Yeah, it maybe be easy. Hank, would now be an okay time? I can pull up the slides because we actually have something specifically on. I think let me go through the slides real quick because it deals specifically with the precedent for this, and then we can that might answer some of the questions. Here we go, and then we can open it up. So, okay, is this the one? Let me just make sure I'm on the right one. Sorry. No, here it is, Rutgers. Okay, so I just want to give a little bit of an overview of the campaign and the relationship of Rutgers to ICE as an introduction. I'm going to go through it real quick. Some of you might have seen this, but I think it might just give an overall sense of both what the ties are and why it's so important and why we can fight back. So Rutgers drop ICE. These are very scary times. I don't think I need to belabor the point. It's beyond just ICE. I personally have just been sort of extremely distraught by the war abroad as well, and so I think that one of the things we need to do, and why I'm so happy we're here in person and over Zoom, is come together because in moments like this, it's very easy to feel powerless and depressed, and by coming together, I think is one of the ways that we can turn that around and actually change things. People are rising up. And so, these policies around ICE and also abroad are extremely unpopular. And for me, I took a lot of inspiration from the Minneapolis uprising. The heroism of ordinary people in Minneapolis and the Twin Cities and across Minnesota was really astounding. And they came, they had a mass strike on January 23rd. And I think it shows you what kind of latent power we have when we fight back. And they forced ICE out. And I think we need to take lessons from that about raising our ambitions for what we can and should be doing at this moment. This is Bovino. So Bovino was the first person who was in charge of the operation, got the boot, and now ICE as a whole was forced to retreat from Minnesota. But obviously, we have a lot to do if we're going to actually stop ICE. We haven't won anywhere near where we need to get. So taking a step back, and I think the reason I wanted to show these images is I think it really maybe foregrounds why the corporate question is important and why focusing on organizing against ICE at our schools is important, because that's maybe not obvious, it's maybe not intuitive. The all of the experience and research on authoritarianism shows that the way you defeat an authoritarian regime, which we are now living under, is not primarily by like frontally attacking it. They have the arms, we are a nonviolent movement. The way you overcome those autocrats is by you pull away the pillars of support in society. So the regime itself can't actually function without all sorts of different institutions bending the knee and sort of complying. And so, in particular, we have two central leverage points as people on a campus. We have both our campuses themselves, and we've seen how important campuses have been. Trump trying to force universities to capitulate gives you some sense of how much that's important for Trump. But then also, and above all, I would say corporations. Corporations are the most important institution in the country, probably even more so than the government. And the good news is that we have a lot of leverage over both of these, both schools and businesses, in a way that we don't short of elections over the government. So you can force schools to divest, and you can force companies to retreat. And we can think of some examples recently. Think of like Tesla takedown, forced Elon Musk out of the White House. Think of how the folks who boycotted Disney after they fired Jimmy Kimmel, forced Jimmy Kimmel to come back. And so you give some examples of this, and I'll give another one as we go, of the way that ordinary people can pull away these institutions and pull away the corporations from supporting ICE. And the the reason that's so important to do that is that, as was sort of mentioned in the first point, the colleges and Rutgers in particular are central mechanisms through which ICE is able to do what it does. So they recruit on our campuses, including Rutgers. They need fly in. So those planes that we're using, literally our sports teams, as we speak, are using the same planes that the day before, days or after, are being used to terrorize communities across the country. And I'll just flag, and this is a victory that happened recently. Avelo Airlines, which was one of the charter companies that has been central to ICE's functioning, because of a mass campaign over the last 8 months, we were able to force Avelo Airlines to break its contract with ICE because the amount of bad press and the amount of pressure on them was so high that for their own sort of narrow-minded business reasons, they decided that it made more sense for their profit model to break with ICE than to continue with business as usual. And so that put a real impediment on ICE's ability to function because there's only so many flights and they had to waste a lot of money and time in trying to figure out how to reroute. So it's that process. Avelo just gives you like a little glimpse of what could happen on a much more wide scale way if we put our pressure on the companies and our schools to break from the Trump administration and from ICE. They need cars to drive in. So Enterprise, as I mentioned, rents all of ICE's cars. They need businesses to feed them. They need beds to sleep in at night. So Hilton, again, has been central to housing ICE agents across the country. And so what we're here to talk about today, and I'm not going to go super long, is to say, well, what can we do at Rutgers? This is an organizing event, and hopefully all of you, if you're not already involved, will get involved. The Schools Drop ICE campaign is a nationwide campaign that's been initiated by AFT, AAUP, the professors' unions and K-12 unions, Sunrise Movement, Young Democratic Socialists of America, and others to, on a nationwide level, do what we're about to describe here, which is forcing our universities to break from these companies. And so what is the plan to win? And this goes to Hank's question. Essentially, we're trying to replicate the United Students Against Sweatshop model, which came from the 1990s, early 2000s, which was very successful. It got over 130 colleges to stop selling sweatshop clothing. And you say, well, how did they do that? How did they get so many colleges to do something that they didn't want to do, which was make a real financial shift? And the answer is basically the following. They created a crisis for the university administration. They created so much pressure that the university could not just keep on ignoring us and putting it into sort of an endless committee like they normally do. And so how did they do that? Well, we have people who went through that experience and wrote about it and who talked about it, and we're trying to replicate it. The first thing they did is they got numbers, that our power is first and foremost in numbers. The reason we lose and the reason so many past petitions or efforts on this campus and others have lost tends to be that we just don't have enough people involved. And the good news is that at this moment, Rutgers, like so many other colleges, the overwhelming majority of people on our campus are against what ICE is doing. So this is a very widely felt issue, but it's also very deeply felt. People are viscerally outraged because of the murders of Renee Good, Alex Preddy, and the terrorization of undocumented people, including many times the family members or even their students themselves at our school. So this is a widely felt, it's a deeply felt issue, and that means that we have the potential, more so than a lot of other efforts we've been involved in, maybe even in recent years, to get huge numbers involved. And we're already, we saw in Minnesota what kind of scale can happen when it comes to the fight around ICE. So numbers, you have to have disruption, nonviolent disruption, but you need to actually create a crisis. You need to sort of put your numbers in the gears of the administration. Particularly students have an ability to do that, but the combined forces of all this are even more powerful to create a crisis. And then you need to have winnable demands. We're not just sort of saying in general, we're against ICE. We have these very specific things that we're asking the administration to do that it can do. There's no reason they have to use Enterprise rather than Avis. This is an easy thing for them to shift, and they have no genuine, even plausible excuse for why they wouldn't switch companies when there's so many alternatives. And that creates a crisis for them. The movement, the basic proposal, and not all the different organizations have signed on to phase 3. The first phase are grow the movement, so that's the first thing we need to do. And the major way we're doing that is through petition signatures. Then we escalate our pressure and we move towards mass nonviolent disruption. Again, asterisks. This hasn't been officially approved beyond some of the student groups. So what faculty end up doing is to be determined. But that's the overall arch for both this semester and going into the fall. phase one, set up an organizing committee. So there is already a campaign on that has begun on campus, and there's ways for people to get plugged in. There's a meeting this Friday, I believe, and we can share the information for that. And we're going to be starting by doing mass petitioning, where we're not just posting things online and hoping people sign up, but where we're mapping out our departments. We're saying who knows who there, and we're going to systematically talk with our colleagues, and students are going to talk to their, fellow students about why we have the urgent moral sort of responsibility to force our university to stop being complicit in ICE. And we're going to get 20% of faculty, 20% of students to sign the petition. Then we're going to escalate through picketing, through reaching out to influential alumni, disrupting fancy university events, protests at the homes of chancellors, this type of thing. And then upcoming, like once we have enough momentum, there could be student sit-ins, no work, no school, no buying on May 1st, which is a National Day of Action, campouts, things like that, but all very much committed to nonviolence, no property destruction, because we know that isolates our movements, developing new leaders. So it's not just those of us who've been involved for all this time, but we're really consciously trying to bring in new people, help develop them, and coalitions between students, faculty, and staff. And so this is the sign up form. I can put it, or maybe somebody else can put it because I'm in sharing screen. So it's tinyurl.com/drop ice organize. Once I'm done sharing my screen, I can drop that in the chat, but maybe if somebody else out there can drop that, that'd be great. You should sign up here. This is how we'll get you into the system, and we'll let you know about the upcoming meetings at Rutgers and beyond. And the just the last thing, just to go over very quickly again, is which are the targets we have. We have Hilton on campus. We don't have flock cameras. This is a fifth target that exists nationwide, which is the surveillance. You might have seen it like the Super Bowl. There was all this pushback against the Ring surveillance app. That's Flock is behind it. And so we don't have that, fortunately. But we have all of the other ones, Enterprise, Target, and then these airline companies. So to just end with, and then we can open up for discussion and hear more from Hank and from everybody. Please sign up. Please, we're going to need everyone's work. This is only going to happen if we understand the urgency of this moment. We understand this is a winnable fight. And if all of us commit towards talking with our colleagues and getting people riled up. And I think this is a moment for that. My experience so far working on this campaign the last few weeks has been it's been met with like a tremendous amount of energy. People are ready to fight around ICE. People are up in arms and they want something concrete to do, right? They don't want to feel powerless. They want to say like, I'm making a difference and this is how I can see that I'm pushing back against these sort of atrocities we're seeing. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks for being here. And Hank, I hope that in a very long-winded way answered part of your question.
I think it did. I have one other question, and we can start opening up the chat, and we can start encouraging people to raise their own questions. But there's a lot of stuff going on, right? I mean, we are I got the same class sometimes the world is on fire. So how do we link this to the other things that we're all trying to organize around, like the war that is now starting on Iran and what's going on in Palestine and et cetera. How do we pull this all together to make it clear that just working on one thing doesn't necessarily mean we're not paying attention to the other stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably anybody of us that's on this call is up in arms about all of those different things you mentioned. And so it's really important that we have a vision of, justice for all and on all these different issues. I would say that the way I look at this is fighting around ICE at this moment is the number one way we can build our capacity as a movement in general, because ICE is both the most sort of like widely and deeply felt issue. It's the one that you beyond our usual suspects. You're going to be able to go talk to a colleague and they're like, yeah, I'll sign that petition. Yeah, that's crazy what they're doing. It's crazy. Rutgers is using flights that ICE is using. Like, what? I didn't know that. And if we're able to build out our capacity, because that's really what it comes down to, is if the movement stays just the folks who are on this call and just those who are already involved in the unions and we're going to anti-war activities, we're not going to win. Our strength is by building a real mass movement. And that is something at the scale of what we saw in Minnesota, or at least getting in that direction. And we think that it is entirely possible to move in that direction. And I think ICE is the best sort of entryway into that. And as we know, once people get involved in organizing, they don't put that power only to one issue. They can put it towards all of the different issues, including our union. And this is going to be a great way to build our union. This is an event organized by our union. And I think, what is a union? A union is an organization of coworkers fighting, their employers, fighting for their interests, fighting for on behalf of the issues we care about. And so I really think that fighting around ICE right now, because it's so sort of burning an issue, is going to be the best way we build our union, build our capacity, and we'll use that energy on all of the different fights we're involved in.
Okay, we're going to start taking questions. Patrick is first. Yeah.
Patrick there.
Yeah, raised his hand.
Mhm.
Yeah, Patrick.
Hi, Patrick. I gave you the ability to unmute.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks, Eric, for that. That was incredible and concise. My questions were points I want to make are student athletes and their potential role in this. I mean, they did really big things at University of Missouri a number of years back in terms of like racism and forcing their president to step down. And we're not necessarily looking to do that here at Rutgers, but student athletes could have an outsized voice here in terms of getting on a plane or not getting on a plane, things like that. And then the other piece is we've got a collective of progressive unions that are working on like meeting the moment and talking about ICE and authoritarianism. And we're doing these sessions throughout the state. Is there a role, or could we roll this up into the state of New Jersey and whether they have any of these contracts? I know Palantir has come up recently that the state pension system still invested there. And we're talking about Palantir and Rutgers. So just wondering how to is there a combo there? And then finally, it's the right campaign to run. I think it aligns a lot with what we want to do at the bargaining table around common good issues and protecting our international scholars and our communities and our students. Could it also be a fiscally responsible move too, right? That Rutgers could actually save money by getting away from these exclusive contracts with these particularly bad companies. That's a lot of questions, but wanted to throw it out there. Thank you.
Thanks. Those are hard questions. I don't know if I have the answers to all of those. I mean, those are really, really, I think, important points. Yeah, I don't know on the financial. I don't know if they save money. Like I would hope so. At a minimum, it should be fiscally neutral, which is nice. It's the type of thing that makes it easier to win. That would be useful, I think, to figure out. But at a minimum, I think that's what we can say. And that on the student athletes piece, yeah, I agree 100%. I think that was the first thing we had our first meeting. I was like, who knows any student athletes? Like this is really, we have an opening because of the centrality of the sports departments in particular. And I think it's tricky because I'd be interested in what other people say based off of past experience trying to reach out to student athletes. What other activists who've been at Rutgers longer than me and student activists have said is that what's hard because they're like, this is like almost their job, and so they're really quite dependent on the sports team and they're wary about speaking out. On the other hand, like there's a lot of athletes who are speaking out against ICE. The Olympics, there's a lot of this. And we did see in 2020 around Black Lives Matter that you did have, younger athletes speaking out. And I think ICE is kind of similar. It's one of these things that a lot of people feel strongly about, and it's not really so controversial, at least in like a college setting. And so I think we should try. And I don't know the best mechanisms. Some people, Sherry had, or our great organizer of the union said, actually a lot of them take classes, for instance, at the Labor Center. So, we can look in the classes we have, and it's a little tricky if it's somebody in your class, but if anybody has ideas of how one might go about or happens to know like a, activisty type student, I think that would be really, really helpful, even just as a first entry point. And just one thing to pitch, the meeting, just really concretely, the meeting for our next Rutgers organizing committee is this Friday at 2:00 over Zoom. And so I would just really encourage people to put that into their calendar. If you sign up on the link we sent you, we'll send you the Zoom link. So that's this Tuesday, 2 o'clock over Zoom to get involved.
Friday. This Friday.
This Friday, yeah, 2 o'clock over Zoom.
Okay, so I think Troy is up, so it'll be Troy, Rosella, Norman, and then Howie, who's here. So go ahead, Troy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm wondering if you can summarize why this strategy is being focused on. And in particular, I am all for making vocal public statements against ICE on campus, defending students against ICE, and so forth. But, attacking, so to say, enterprise rental car seems very indirect, insofar as if Rutgers cut off 100% of their enterprise funding, I don't think enterprise would care very much. If all universities did that, and if this were a united strategy, that might be something. But in addition, I happen to know that ICE in this area doesn't just use Hilton, it also uses Hyatt, it uses all local hotels. It is true that they have unlimited funds, so they would prefer to be at a nice hotel than a cheaper hotel. But for the Hilton's point of view, I know that they rent at Hyatt, and I know the football team rents at Hyatt, and so I'm not sure. What I'm hoping is you can explain why this strategy, rather than more direct anti-ICE strategies, which are easier to convince people of and that other folks are working on. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So the short answer is, first of all, yeah, this is a nationwide campaign. So yeah, it's true that if Rutgers on its own were to break its contracts with Enterprise, that would not be enough to force Enterprise to rethink and break from the Trump administration. But fortunately, even in the span of, I think it's just been 2 weeks since we launched the campaign, we have, last I looked, like 67 different campuses, including the biggest ones nationwide. And we had over 1,500 people sign up. And I would expect that by the end of the semester, we'll have 3 or 4 times that. And so that is actually a huge amount of potential money and leverage. And oftentimes this is the best way to get at companies, is by focusing on the places where you have leverage, which is colleges and local governments. And so you're saying, well, why focus on the companies rather than ICE directly? Again, I think it's really important to understand that ICE, the companies, the deportation apparatus is completely dependent on these companies. There's no ICE separate from the corporate world that is enabling its back-end operations. Literally, ICE can't function without places to sleep. It can't function without cars to drive. It literally does not have the mechanism. So when you're saying, well, we're going to fight to take its cars away, yeah, that is fighting ICE. It's not doing anything. It's not a separate fight. It's literally taking on that operation. And so I would say that the question of like why this over other things, well, the first is it's not over other things. For instance, on this campus, really concretely, we're joining forces together with students who've been organizing around the sanctuary campus. And so we see this as sort of complementary to other fights around ICE and not as counterposed to. So really concretely, at Rutgers, there's been students organizing around sanctuary campus, and they're very excited about taking on these corporate demands. And to me, part of the reason for this, in addition, is that it is more winnable. And I think it's really important because one of the difficulties we have organizing around ICE right now is people aren't actually sure what to do. So when you say take on ICE directly, well, in most cases, what that has looked like has been doing things like ICE Watch, right? Which is people sort of documenting ICE, what it's doing. But we don't actually have mechanisms currently, or even in Minnesota they didn't, where you could like physically prevent ICE from doing what it's doing. So it's not the case that there's some sort of this other tactic that we have that can paralyze the machine, and so we should do that directly. The actually most direct way we have to paralyze the machine is by taking on these corporate targets because they have leverage, because we don't have the physical ability or political ability to like literally stop ICE agents when they're going around as much as we might wish we did. And so it's important to use the leverage that we do have. And I would just end by saying that that's part of the reason I think there's a lot of excitement around this, is that people feel hopeless and they don't want to just sort of wait for ICE to come and terrorize our communities, and that the most we can do is document that. That's important. It's really important people join like their local Know Your Rights groups. People should do that. This isn't counterposed to this. This is like in addition to, but the way we're framing it is it's important not just to be on the defense. It's important not just to have sanctuary campus so that we're waiting to see what ICE does. And then frankly, also it's important to like understand that ICE isn't first and foremost targeting students at this point. You know, it did at Columbia. We need to have a sanctuary campus, but they're overwhelmingly targeting non-college educated working class immigrants. Like the parents of our students are the people that are going after. And so we need to have an approach that goes off the campus in addition and takes on to ICE as directly as we can. And so, yeah, going after the corporations is a winnable thing we can do that would make a material impact and build the capacity of our movement to escalate over the summer and into the fall.
Yeah, just a real quick, I'm gonna read what Ajwa points out in the chat. They can't function because they don't have their own infrastructure. So if we can remove the infrastructure or weaken them dramatically, that's I think the theory here. So go ahead, Rosella, I think you're next.
Yeah, hi there. Rosella Sabatini. I'm with the Indivisible Highland Park Steering Committee. Kevin Dougherty and I, who's also on the steering committee, had met with Jessica Hunsden, who told us about this event. And Kevin and I were both pretty excited to hear about this initiative because as part of Indivisible, we've also been wrestling with how we can build and partner with the Rutgers as well as unions on a bunch of shared goals. And going after businesses, I think, is an excellent strategy. I just wanted to mention a couple. So one is just a general question of like, how do we connect and how can Indivisible Highland Park connect into this in a way that's supportive, you know, just brainstorming wise. So that might be a separate conversation. I wanted to just, my background, I'm retired now, but I did spend a lot of time in corporate America. I think that the one thing to explore is if there's a way to access, I don't know if there's centralized procurement arms of universities, if Rutgers has a central place where they do purchasing and that's where the contracting happens with companies. And something that might be interesting to look into if there's a connection into those groups is you can build, you know, they should have competitive RFP processes when they look for new contracts with, let's say, car rental companies, and they could build in criteria that has them not award contracts to bad actors. You know, so that's just a thought in terms of another possible strategy. And I think I lost my other thought. I'll stop there. You know, so the bottom line is, oh, the other thought is, it's not just the financial impact. I think that Rutgers and other universities going after an enterprise or a Hilton, the companies care a lot about reputational risk. So it's not just about the money. So if that, and I agree that this could be very popular, I think for students, you know, broadly, the more the word gets out, you know, that enterprise is being targeted, so to speak, just like Target is having a lot of flack from, you know, all different stakeholders on their reputation. Reputation is a big deal to them. So it has financial ramifications. So I applaud the effort, you know, and we're just listening and learning right now and trying to figure out how we can help.
Yeah, that's such an important point. I'm glad you brought that up because, yeah, it's not just the money that we would cut off via Rutgers, but in some ways, the biggest thing I think, frankly, is the reputational thing. Like companies are hypersensitive to their brands, and so if it becomes a national scandal that, you know, enterprise, most people don't realize. I honestly didn't know until, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago that Enterprise was like the company doing. It's not a bunch of different companies. It's Enterprise, Alamo, National. It's the same thing. You know, if people find out, that could really tank their product. I mean, think about how much Tesla stocks went down once Elon Musk got into the White House and started doing this stuff. It's like people care about this. And if we're able as universities, which have a lot of sort of cultural weight, to make that known and becomes a national issue, I think it's more than sufficient leverage-wise to force these companies into like a real crisis.
Norman and then Howard.
Okay. Well, first, Eric, your presentation was brilliant. I read your article, by the way, on the military budget, and if I weren't in the process of retirement, I would definitely assign it in my classes. It was really fine, really fine. I have a few more comments than questions. The first is that on March 28th, there will be the National No Kings demonstrations through the country. Over 5 million people participated in last year's demonstrations. It's hoped that there will be more here. It would be great if there were a demonstration at Rutgers, but right now, at the best of my knowledge, there isn't. There are demonstrations, No Kings demonstrations in Highland Park and also in Princeton that are expected, the Princeton one is expected to be fairly large. If we could have a Rutgers contingent present, particularly the Highland Park demonstration, it's too late, I imagine, to get a presentation on the campus. But if we could have a Rutgers group with Rutgers signs and emphasizing the ICE issue, it's important for all of us to understand that the importance of the ICE issue is that there is massive opposition to it because of what ICE has done. It is seen by large numbers of people as basically engaged in police state terror. People see it in those terms. Large numbers of people increasingly, and I use the term fascism and also Nazi fascism, Nazism, to look at what ICE is doing as against authoritarianism, because that's a much vaguer, more general. I find it much more useful. And then to define what I mean by fascism. But these are things that we can do in terms of mobilizing support against ICE. And as for the corporations, all of that is true. Nothing in this country will work, government or anything else, without private enterprise. We don't have a major public sector. We don't have national economic planning. We have a public sector, but it's dependent on business. Everything is dependent on business. So targeting business makes very good sense. And here, what we can also do, I think, with enterprise and with Target, I don't know about the others, we can begin to go out and tell people to boycott these businesses, to stop going to Target, to stop getting cars from Enterprise. They have competitors. And often, I know as an historian, that these boycott appeals, when the labor movement has been at the center of them, have tended to be effective because customers are lost and competitors gain, and this often leads to the companies that are being boycotted to change. Okay, those are all my comments. Took a long time. Sorry, but I'm notoriously wordy. Okay.
An academic who's notoriously wordy.
Oh,
Never met that.
I never have.
well, in which case you haven't been around too long. Okay.
Certainly.
Yeah, the union, the academic unions, I mean, your age is already signed on. Two faculty unions are discussing what we can do. We haven't made any firm decisions yet, but we're definitely interested. Either in Highland Park, be on campus. We're going to try and push our members after this thing as well. So, do you want to add anything here?
No, I think those are really great points. I don't think I have too much to add. I would just actually add one thing I forgot to mention the last point, which was just to the indivisible folks. I think it's really great. And people put in the chat, I'm just reading that. So Rutgers AAUP-AFT has agreed to co-sponsor Indivisible Highland Park, the next No Kings rally. So I think that's a great idea, something we could collaborate on. And yeah, just generally, I think it would be awesome if any of the Indivisible folks could come to the meeting on Friday at 2. And I think it'd be really, it'd be really welcome to figure out how we sort of lean on each other and act in solidarity.
Howie's up next.
Hi, I'm Howie Swerdloff. I'm secretary of the Rutgers Adjunct Union, and I'm a colleague of Eric's and others in the room here at the Labor Center in New Brunswick. And to Norman's point, I just wanted to second that boycotts have a great tradition in the American labor movement. Especially in the 19th century before they were outlawed, but they are an effective tactic, and I would urge that we extend our campaign to include consumer boycotts. But obviously, Rutgers is our primary target. But what I raised my hand to say originally was that it's sort of a question. We have a movement here at Rutgers. People are outraged about the erasure of DEI here at Rutgers in compliance, anticipatory compliance with the Trump administration, and I'm thinking there must be a synergy here with the ICE demands that we might be able to tap into. I mean, they're so obviously connected because of the issue of white supremacy, and racism. So just putting that out there, this week we had a letter written by members of our community to the president complaining about the erasure of DEI from the websites, from offices being closed, people being fired, archives being erased. So I think that there's I don't know where to go with this, but it seems to me there's already an outrage and a movement brewing around that too. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I guess here's how I look at it is first of all, you're right. Like the all of these fights are connected, and it's deeply rooted in both the like history and present of racism and white supremacy in the U.S., and then frankly just the racist policies of the Trump administration. And so it's hitting us on all these different, and it's hitting, I mean, it's hitting people of color, and it's hitting Americans as a whole on all these different areas. And it's important to see this as part of the same fight. The way I look at it is, I think in order to like force our universities to not be complicit, like in some of what Trump is doing by refusing to fight, which is, Rutgers is definitely not the worst, so to its credit, it has not gone anywhere near as far as some of these other universities. But still, yeah, like not fighting around DEI is an example of sort of anticipatory capitulation. I think that realistically, if over the next year or two, we can build a real mass movement, which we don't currently have, and I think we need to be sober about that. We have public support, but we don't currently have a mass movement on the war, on ICE. That's the thing we have to do, is we have to turn that anger at Trump and at ICE into actual organizing and disruption. And if we're able to do that, I would expect that you're going to start seeing more universities being willing to openly defy Trump, because they're going to see Trump as sort of how can I put it, as like a lame duck who's going to be on his way out soon, and that the cost to them of breaking with Trump is going to be lower than the cost that they're going to incur from just completely alienating themselves from faculty, from students, from alumni, right? But that's only going to happen if there's such a mass movement that they're willing to buck the real risk. And I think we should say it's a real risk to go up against Trump on DEI and stuff like that. That's a real risk. Even doing the stuff around corporations is a risk, right? Because they have leverage over federal funding. It's not like completely invented in their heads. So you need to force them to have courage by showing that the overwhelming majority of your campus and at other universities as well are putting up a fight against Trump. And I think universities, frankly, have in the past and in the US and then in other countries have been central to fighting against authoritarianism. And so you can think about the role of students in the civil rights movement, both Black and white students. You can think about the role of students in like taking down dictators across the world and professors and all that. And so we have, I think that is really what I hope, is that universities can again be this kind of fulcrum that help inspire the rest of the population to fight back. And so I'd like to see that happen. And I think if we do that, that's going to make it easier to win, not just on ICE, but around DEI and some of the other ones that would constitute like a more frontal, direct break with the Trump administration.
So Patrick's up next, and David, and then there's a question that Paul asks in the chat that we also get to. I think that Patrick.
Yeah, Patrick Nolan, I'm the executive director of our two faculty unions. To Norman's point, with No Kings, and I think leading up to May Day, we are, as I said earlier, working with progressive unions. So that's CWA, that's NJEA, that's our two faculty unions. It's the faculty union at the state colleges, to coordinate that and having a labor presence, right, for No Kings, right, and targeted at certain locations where members were more likely to be. So really, like rolling up into the question of like movement, Eric, maybe as unions, we should be functioning as, not moving from crisis to crisis, but thinking of it all as one big movement building exercise. And so if we, even if it's just something that's restricted to our members, if we're like getting into the practice of having forms that's, have people identify whether they're a member, a student, an alumni, or community, it allows the folks an individual to, when they're in our spaces, to be able to sign up and say, I'm down for the movement, not just this single fight, because then we constantly are going back and saying, how did we do it last time? And what did we do? What didn't we do? We're actually building this, and people they're volunteering into a movement, right? A space that we are collectively responding to the crisis of the moment, but we're in it together for the long haul. And I think that's how we then don't deal with it as, oh, we've got to fight for our contracts. Oh, we've got to fight on DEI. We've got to fight on ICE. We've got to fight on, these wars that are breaking out. It's all sort of together, right? Our values are the same, regardless of the issue, generally speaking. And so thinking about how do we take on these issues in a more proactive way, meaning that we're building community, building a movement for the fights that lie ahead, right? And so we'll be more effective in the immediate sense if we're thinking that way, I think, and we'll be so much more effective as we move forward with building up our allies and supporting our students and our communities. So, and really taking care of the issues important to our members.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, the way I look at it is part of the way you address what you're talking about there, which is how people can understand when they're getting involved that it's not just about one fight, but it's about everything. I think part of that is doing a lot more political education, and this is something that we're not so great about doing in movements, and is in the process of, the fight backs. How do we help expand people's horizon to see sort of the systemic roots of all this stuff? And frankly, our unions on campus do a better job than a lot of other unions. So I think, Rutgers is actually at the, compared to most of the labor, much better at sort of making it clear how these fights are connected. So I think it's to our union's credit that that's happening at all. I think, though, that it's just a constant process. You just constantly need, in the context of movement campaigns, to be doing political education to connect those dots. And, how do you do joint events, joint teach-ins? I think, that being said, it's still important to have like discrete fights, because sometimes you can have the opposite problem. Whereas if you're telling somebody from the offset, you have to go up against the whole system right now, which is sort of true, but it can be a little overwhelming. And I think it's pretty important for new people who aren't yet activists to be able to act on the thing that they're feeling most passionate about, and to feel like, oh yeah, I don't know, there's so many problems in the world. I think I can make a difference on this right now. And that's a good intuition, because it's a way for people to get involved. And then in that process, we have to help expand their horizons and get them to be like lifelong activists, right? Because this fight is not going to end in the next year. It's not going to end even after we get rid of Trump. It's, it's systemic. And so I think it's that sweet spot. I don't think we can expect everyone sort of off the bat to understand what they're signing up for. Do you know what I mean? I think that's a process that you have to go through a little bit of political education struggle to get to that point.
I just want to be mindful of time. We're 2:52. We want to do kind of a final kind of close. We'll kind of say here are the next steps. But David's got
I'll be brief.
And then we'll answer Paul's question.
So first, I just want to say this was a great meeting. I mean,
this was, I feel like I'm in meetings 6 or 7 times a day, and I'm waiting for the next
Can we
great
get the
meeting.
microphone closer to you?
Oh, sure.
So
This
that
one
you're
here?
online? Yeah.
Yeah, and this was truly a great meeting, and I just made a couple notes. I can't make the meeting on Friday, unfortunately. And I just wanted to affirm sort of the positive things I took out of this meeting. And the first, Eric, thank you so much for an incredibly clear and concise presentation. That's sort of a model for me. I'm gonna have to think about that the next time I have to present, because I was really impressed with that. And I also appreciate you saying that with regard to this particular strategy or tactic, it's not either or. It's not you're only doing this or you're only doing that. It's a mix of things, and I really appreciated that. And I really appreciated Hank bringing up early, and as others have picked up on, the connections between the genocide in Palestine, the war of terror on Iran, and Howie bringing up the connections to DEI. And you know what I take out of that is we're facing sociopathic elites that are dragging the entire world to the abyss. That is what is happening. And we can't allow ourselves to normalize a world of genocide and racism and white supremacy and wars of imperial conquest, right? So I really appreciate what numerous people here have said about the importance of tying all these struggles together. And at the same time, Eric, I totally agree with you. You can't just go out in the street corner and say, hey, everybody, we've got to stop bad stuff. I mean, you know, that's not going to work. We need to come up with discrete strategies. So I appreciate that as well. And I also appreciate you, Eric, saying that this is an entry point of people primed to get involved in the struggle. We saw how much students got involved with the anti-genocide encampments. There are lots of people out there, I think you're right, who will use this as a point of entry. And in terms of political education, I often feel the best way to educate people is to get them involved in something, you know, to get them committed to something, even if it's small, and then they have the receptivity and the interest to expand their horizon. So yes, to the importance of students. Somebody mentioned community. I think that's really important here in all the towns in New Jersey. And the last thing I just wanted to say is that April 17th is the day of action in higher ed. And it occurs to me that in addition to all the things we've discussed here for actions, we should probably, as soon as possible, talk about whether we can imagine us doing an ICE event to contribute to that National Day of Action. But once again, thanks to you, Eric, Hank, Howie, all the others who made great comments.
That's the Hilo.
Well, it's Hilo does it, and so does the Coalition for Action in Higher Ed, COTI.
So,
Good summary, Andy.
Finding it.
Paul asks, how does this, again, this is, you kind of asked this, but he's asking specifically, how does this overlap with efforts intellectually, with the BDS efforts, intellectually or organization?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a really good question. I think, yeah, so as like someone who's been really supportive of PBS, I think that this would set a really strong precedent. If we can win around ICE, I think it's going to set a really strong precedent that these universities can and should divest from apartheid. And we haven't yet built the critical mass in most universities to make that happen. I think, you know, we have to get there. Even and public opinion has shifted a lot. But the encampments, I think, were extremely important for bringing the issue up, but we didn't yet have, I think, the like overwhelming level of movement and support to make the administrations fold. And so I think that if we're able to win on ICE while building our capacity, that's going to allow us to simultaneously build up the forces to go on to the next fight, and maybe the fight as it's going on still, because it's, you know, yeah, it's terrifying. Like even just like right before coming on the call, I'm just looking, it's like things are spiraling in the Middle East. Israel's like, you know, is going on the offensive. And if we can't just sort of accept that, and I think that we have a responsibility to build up the amount of power we can. And yeah, all these ties are, all these things are related. And I think that to me, the difficulty is that the major reason people don't get involved is not that they disagree. It's like people already agree with on the, like the war, like in Iran is super unpopular, it's like less than 25%. But the thing that people don't yet believe is that they have any power to do that. And so the number one thing we need to teach people is that they have power. And that's the type of thing that so it's not just telling people about the problems in the world. People understand that, actually. Most people do, even if they don't know the details. The number one problem is that so many people feel like there's nothing they can do. And so the way we teach them there's something they can do is oftentimes by picking winnable fights, even if it's just by one little corner of that whole big picture. But you teach them that you can fight and win. That's something that never leaves you. It's for me, that's like I learned that when I was 17, fighting around a small fight in San Francisco, and it hooked me for life. And I think probably a lot of the people on this call is something similar. You see that, like maybe you saw civil rights movement, or you saw the anti-war movement in Vietnam, and that showed you that power. And you need to give people examples like that, because people, until they see that, until they feel that, it's hard for them to feel like they can fight on any of the issues.
It's giving them hope.
Yeah.
That's, I think, one of the key things. Understanding that this is where this opportunity. It is that hope is something that's active and it's something that's actionable. That you get the opportunity to do the work to make it better. That's a little bit louder. So louder.
I think your mic, can we just switch, give you that mic for the wrap up? David, you just pass him that mic. Let's try it.
Yeah.
Troy has a
So-
question in the chat.
Oh, and Troy has a question. Do we want to read that? Where is it?
Is there interest in finding RU expenses on Global Air, and if so, should I send it to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
All I would say is we should continue looking at all of the different companies. We did have, like, I think a couple of weeks of pretty intense research on it, and my understanding is the one and that we were able to confirm was Global X, and that we have I don't think our researchers found anything on other companies. It's not to say that there's no chance that that's possible, but they did spend a lot of time looking into. We got FOIA requests. We did like a pretty deep dive on Rutgers, so I'm pretty confident that our list of targets here is comprehensive. It doesn't mean that if other people don't want to look into it, but at this point I feel pretty confident that we have an understanding of where the sort of overlap between these companies and Rutgers lies.
Okay, so I think, am I heard at this point? I have it says they'd like me to unmute, but if you can hear me, let's finish this up with what our specific next steps are going to be in terms of petitions, in terms of the meetings. This way people know, people have marching orders as they leave here.
Sure. So I would say that the number one thing we need people to do is, once the petition is ready, and that should be by hopefully the end of the week, we're literally just waiting on students, because it's a good problem. They had 3,000 signatures on Sanctuary campus, and so we're sort of figuring out with this different student groups how we incorporate these. Maybe do we have one new petition, or do we just sort of add demands to their old petition? That's going to get finalized in the next few days. That's why we don't have a petition yet. That should be done by the end of the week. The number one thing for anyone who's on this call that can do is to get people in your departments, in your unions. If you're in a union that hasn't endorsed the campaign yet, please formally endorse the campaign and be ready to send out the petition to members. But the number one thing for people individually here is we need to understand it's not enough just to send out over email. It's going to require that sort of one-on-one. It doesn't have to be in person. I know Rutgers is dispersed better in person, but we'll help you make a list of your department. We'll have a big master sheet of saying, okay, how are we going to get to 20%? And then we're going to have people map out who they know, reach out, who they could reach out to even if they don't know them, and we're going to have that process of mass petitioning, because that's going to be how we have the conversation with people. People right now Rutgers don't know about enterprise. They don't know about these companies, and it's not intuitive. Even on this call, we sort of had to talk it through a little bit, like, well, why companies? It seems a little indirect. So you got to answer that to folks. So the number one thing right now, it's not that petitions in themselves matter. Petitions is an organizing tool for us to build a mass base, and so that's the number one ask I have for everyone here. Obviously, if you can come to the meeting on Friday, that's great. But if you have to choose where to use your energy, the number one thing I would ask in the short term is to get ready, hitting the ground running next week, and we'll be reaching out to start doing mass petitioning. I'm thinking if you also have any students you're in touch with, other groups you want to plug in, connect them to us. The union is all of our unions are working on this, and you can reach out to me. I'm going to put my personal email in here. I know you can reach out to Hank. You can reach out to Sherry and anyone in AAUP-AFT. And we're very eager to support you all and make it happen. So I think that's the main thing I would stress.
Very eager to freeze.
up there.
You said the meeting's over.
It froze for a second, but
All good.
Did I freeze? Are we okay? Are we okay?
I think we got it. I think we
Yep.
got it. I want to thank everybody for coming. This was, and I want to especially thank Eric for making his time available for such an important discussion. Everybody who's here in Stone Street with me, it's good to see people in person occasionally. So that's a big plus. And all you guys online doing this virtually, this is great. Keep get in touch with us. Let us know what you think you can do to help, and we will. There's a lot of fights that we have in front of us, and we don't plan on backing down anytime soon. So,
Yes.
that's right. Thanks, guys.